I'm not the kind of person who believes in urban legends or ghost stories or any of that stuff. I've always been pretty rational about things, the kind of guy who needs to see it to believe it. But what happened to me and my girlfriend back in the fall of 2019 changed all of that. I still can't explain it. I've tried 100 different ways to rationalize what we experienced that night, and none of them make any sense. So I guess I'm just going to tell you what happened and let you decide for yourself. This all went down when I was 22, about 3 months into dating this girl I'll call Sarah. We'd met at work, one of those big box retail stores where everyone's just trying to get through their shift without losing their minds. Sarah worked in electronics, and I was in the warehouse, and we'd been flirting for weeks before I finally got the nerve to ask her out. By October, we were in that early relationship phase where everything feels exciting and you're looking for excuses to spend time together. We'd go to movies, grab dinner, drive around aimlessly just talking for hours. Real young love stuff, you know? Looking back on it now, those memories feel almost painful because of what came after. The night it happened was a Friday. Sarah had been dealing with a lot of stress from her family. Her parents were going through a messy separation, and she was caught in the middle of it, playing therapist to both of them, while trying to maintain her own sanity. She'd been texting me all week about how overwhelmed she felt, how she just needed to get away from everything for a while. So when Friday rolled around, I suggested we drive out to this spot I knew about 30 minutes outside of town. It was this overlook area where you could park and see the whole valley lit up at night. Real cliché make-out spot stuff, but I figured it would be quiet and we could just decompress. We left around 9 that night. I picked her up in my old sedan, this beat-up thing that had been my mom's before she upgraded. The heat worked intermittently, and the radio only picked up AM stations, but it got us where we needed to go. Sarah seemed relieved to be away from her house. She'd brought snacks and a couple of energy drinks, and we spent the drive out talking about nothing important. Work gossip mostly, which co-workers were hooking up, who was about to get fired. Normal stuff. I remember feeling really content during that drive, like everything in my life was finally starting to come together. I had a job, a girl I really liked, and enough money to not be completely broke all the time. For a 22-year-old, that felt like success. The overlook was pretty empty when we got there. There were a couple of other cars parked at the far end, but they were far enough away that we had our privacy. I pulled into a spot near the middle, somewhere we could see the view, but weren't completely isolated. Sarah had been quiet for the last few minutes of the drive, just staring out the window, and I asked her if she was okay. She said she was fine, just tired. We sat there for a while with the engine running, so we could keep the heat on, eating chips and talking about her family situation. She was venting mostly, and I was just listening, offering the occasional supportive comment, but mostly letting her get it all out. Around 10:30, I noticed that the other cars had left. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was getting late, and it was a weeknight for most people, even if we had the next day off. But Sarah noticed too, and made some joke about how we had the whole place to ourselves now. She seemed to be in better spirits, laughing more, and we'd moved on from talking about her parents to planning what we wanted to do that weekend. I was thinking about suggesting we watch a movie at my place when I heard it for the first time. It was this scraping sound. Metal on metal, rhythmic and deliberate. It lasted maybe 3 seconds and then stopped. I looked at Sarah, and she looked at me, and I could tell she'd heard it too. I asked her what that was, and she shrugged, said it was probably just the wind or something. The overlook was up on a hill, and there were trees all around us, so that made sense. I tried to shake it off and get back to our conversation, but I was distracted now. Something about that sound had put me on edge, even though I couldn't explain why. A few minutes later, I heard it again. Closer this time. Scrape, scrape, scrape. And then silence. Sarah grabbed my arm, and I could feel her fingers digging in through my jacket. She wasn't laughing anymore. I told her it was probably just another car pulling in, maybe someone parking nearby. But when I looked around, there was nobody there. The parking lot was completely empty, except for us. The security light at the entrance was working fine, and I could see the whole area clearly. There was nothing. Sarah wanted to leave. I could hear it in her voice, that edge of panic starting to creep in. But I was trying to be the tough guy, the rational one. I told her we were fine, that there was nothing to worry about, that it was probably just an animal or something in the woods. She asked me what kind of animal makes a sound like metal scraping, and I didn't have an answer for that. I should have listened to her. I should have started the car right then and gotten us out of there. But I didn't want to seem scared, didn't want her to think I was overreacting. So I just sat there like an idiot, trying to convince both of us that everything was normal. The scraping sound came back maybe 2 minutes later, only this time it was right outside the car. Right outside Sarah's door. She screamed, and I swear to God, my heart stopped beating for a second. The sound continued, this horrible metallic scraping that seemed to go on forever, and I could see something through the window. Not clearly, just a shape moving in the darkness outside. Tall, hunched over, pressing against the glass. Sarah was screaming at me to drive, to get us out of there, and I was fumbling with the keys because my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold them. I got the engine started and threw the car into reverse. As I did, I caught a glimpse of what was outside Sarah's window. I only saw it for a split second before we peeled out of there, but it's burned into my memory like a photograph. It was a man, or at least I think it was a man. He was wearing dark clothes and his face was in shadow, but I could see his arm, his right arm. Where his hand should have been, there was something else. Something that caught the light from the security lamp as we backed away. Something curved and sharp that scraped against the car door as we moved. I drove faster than I have ever driven in my life. Sarah was crying in the passenger seat, hyperventilating, and I was trying to watch the road while also checking the rearview mirror every 2 seconds to make sure nothing was following us. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just seen, trying to convince myself that it wasn't real. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew exactly what it was. We made it back to town in maybe 20 minutes, even though the drive out had taken 30. I didn't stop at any lights, didn't slow down for stop signs, just blew through everything, until we were in a populated area with streetlights and other cars around. Sarah had stopped crying by then, but she wasn't talking either. She just sat there staring straight ahead, her arms wrapped around herself. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner and finally let myself take a breath. My whole body was shaking, and I felt like I might throw up. Sarah looked at me and asked me if I'd seen it. I told her I had. She asked me what it was, and I didn't know what to say. Because saying it out loud would make it real, would acknowledge that what we just experienced actually happened. But I couldn't lie to her, couldn't tell her it was nothing when we both knew better. So I told her the truth. I told her I'd seen a man with a hook where his hand should have been. She started crying again. We sat in that diner parking lot for almost an hour, neither of us wanting to go inside, but not ready to move either. Eventually, Sarah said she needed to call her mom, Needed someone to come pick her up because she didn't want to be in my car anymore. I understood. I didn't want to be in it either. While she was on the phone, I got out and walked around to the passenger side to look at the door. There were scratches there. Deep ones, cutting through the paint all the way down to the metal. 4 parallel lines that started at the window and dragged down toward the ground. I ran my fingers over them and felt sick. Sarah's mom arrived about 30 minutes later. Sarah barely said goodbye to me before getting into her mom's car and leaving. I don't think she was mad at me, just traumatized and needing to be somewhere safe. I drove home in silence, my mind replaying those few seconds over and over. The shape outside the window, the scraping sound, the flash of metal in the light. By the time I got to my apartment, I'd almost convinced myself that we'd both overreacted, that it was just some homeless guy who'd gotten too close to the car and we'd panicked. But then I remembered the scratches on the door, and that theory fell apart. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up researching, which I know sounds crazy, but I needed to understand what had happened. That's when I found all the stories. Dozens of them, hundreds maybe, all variations on the same theme. A couple parked in a lover's lane, a scraping sound, a man with a hook. Sometimes the couple escapes, sometimes they don't. It's an urban legend, one of the most famous ones. I'd heard versions of it growing up, the kind of story kids tell each other at sleepovers to freak each other out. But it was supposed to be fiction. It was supposed to be made up. I found forums where people debated whether the story was based on a real incident or completely fabricated. Most people agreed it was just a cautionary tale, something parents told their kids to keep them from parking in dark places. But there were other posts too, people claiming to have had encounters similar to ours. Most of them were clearly fake, written by people who just wanted attention. But a few of them had details that made my skin crawl. The same scraping sound, the same hunched figure, the same hook catching the light. Sarah didn't talk to me for 3 days. When she finally called, her voice sounded hollow, exhausted. She said she'd been having nightmares every night, that she kept hearing that scraping sound whenever she closed her eyes. She asked me if I thought we should report it to the police. I told her I didn't know what we'd even say, that we'd seen a man with a hook, that we'd experienced something from an urban legend. They'd think we were pranking them or having some kind of shared delusion. She said she knew I was right, but she felt helpless, like we couldn't do anything about what happened. I went to look at the car the next day in full daylight. The scratches were still there, undeniable proof that something had made contact with the vehicle. They were too deep and too uniform to have been caused by a branch or some random accident. Something sharp and metallic had dragged across that door with considerable force. I took pictures of them, not sure what I'd do with the photos, but feeling like I needed evidence. I even considered getting them analyzed somehow, but I didn't know how to explain where they came from without sounding insane. Sarah and I stayed together for another 2 months after that night. We tried to move past it, tried to pretend everything was normal, but it wasn't. Every time we were in my car, she'd tense up, especially when it got dark. She'd check the locks compulsively and watch the windows like she expected to see something outside. I started avoiding that side of town entirely, taking longer routes to get places just so we wouldn't have to drive anywhere near that overlook. Our conversations felt strained, like there was this huge thing between us that we couldn't talk about without falling apart. We broke up right before the holidays. It was mutual, or at least as mutual as breakups can be. We both knew that what happened that night had changed something fundamental between us. We couldn't look at each other without remembering the fear, the panic, the feeling of being hunted by something we couldn't explain. It wasn't anyone's fault, but it made being together too painful. I still drive that car. The scratches are still there because I've never had them fixed. Part of me wants to keep them as a reminder, proof that what happened was real. But another part of me just can't bring myself to explain them to a body shop. Can't stand the thought of having to make up some story about a parking lot accident or a keyed car. Sometimes when I'm sitting at a red light, I'll catch myself staring at them in the side mirror, tracing the lines with my eyes and remembering that night. I don't park in isolated places anymore. I don't go to overlooks or empty parking lots or anywhere that doesn't have other people around. I know that probably sounds paranoid, and maybe it is, but I also know what I saw that night. I know what left those marks on my car, and I know that urban legends have to come from somewhere, have to be based on something real even if the details get exaggerated over time. Sometimes I wonder if there are others out there like me and Sarah. People who've had encounters they can't explain, experiences that match up with stories they thought were just folklore. People who know the truth but can't talk about it because nobody would believe them. I wonder if that's how legends survive, through this chain of people who've seen things they shouldn't have seen, who carry the knowledge in silence because the alternative is being labeled crazy. I looked for Sarah on social media a few months ago. I don't know why exactly. Maybe just wanted to know if she was doing okay. Her profiles are all private now, but I could see her profile picture. She looked good, happy even. I hope she's moved past what happened. Hope she doesn't think about it as much as I do. I hope the nightmare stopped for her. As for me, I still hear that scraping sound sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Metal on metal, rhythmic and deliberate. I know it's just in my head, just my brain replaying the memory. But knowing that doesn't make it any less terrifying. I'll be lying there in the dark, and I'll hear it. And for just a second, I'm back in that car with Sarah, screaming beside me, and something with a hook pressed against the window. I don't tell people this story. Most of my friends don't even know it happened. The ones who do think I'm exaggerating, that Sarah and I saw some random guy, and our imaginations did the rest. And maybe they're right. Maybe we did blow the whole thing out of proportion. Let our fear turn something mundane into something monstrous. But I've got those scratches on my car door that say otherwise. I've got the memory of what I saw burned into my brain. And I've got this feeling, deep in my gut, that we were lucky that night. Lucky that I got the car started when I did. Lucky that whatever was outside Sarah's door didn't get the chance to do what it wanted to do. I still think about driving back to that overlook sometimes, during the day when it's safe. I want to look around, see if there's any evidence of what happened, any sign of who or what was there that night. But I can't bring myself to do it. I'm terrified of what I might find. Or worse, terrified that I might not find anything at all, that there will be no trace of what happened, and I'll be left wondering if any of it was real. The rational part of my brain says urban legends are just stories, that they can't hurt you, that there's no such thing as a man with a hook stalking lovers' lanes. But the part of me that was there that night, the part that saw the shape outside the window and felt the car shake as something scraped against it, that part knows better. That part knows there's something out there, something that shouldn't exist but does anyway. And it's still out there, waiting in dark parking lots and empty overlooks for the next couple who stays too long. I guess what I'm trying to say is this. If you're ever parked somewhere isolated with someone you care about, and you hear a strange sound outside, don't ignore it. Don't try to be brave or rational or tough. Just leave. Start the car and drive away as fast as you can. Because some stories are warnings, and some legends are real, and you don't want to find out which is which when it's too late to escape.